One night, in a small village in South India, a mother dresses her 8-year-old daughter in new clothes. A garland of fresh flowers is woven into her hair, and a pre prepared green necklace known as the talli is tied around her neck. The child smiles, believing she's getting married and has been adorned like a princess. Yet she remains unaware that inside the temple's sanctum sanctorum, before the deity's idol, her family has already bartered her future away. A few years later, as she comes of age, the village's wealthy landlords, cloaked in the guise of religious piety, will claim her in her first sexual transaction. Eventually, she will be sold into the red light districts of the cities. This is not merely a story, it is a lingering legacy known as the Devdasi Pratha. But have you ever wondered how the girls who are now forced into brothels were once among the wealthiest, most educated, and most powerful women in the country? What exactly transpired to cause the goddess of the temple to fall into a quagmire of societal degradation? Let us trace this history from the very beginning. The journey begins approximately 1500 years ago in ancient India, particularly within the Chola, Pallava, and Vijayanagar empires of the south. Being a Devdasi was not a source of shame. A Devdasi was a woman whose marriage was solemnized not with a mortal man but with the deity of the temple. This ritual was known as Potukuttu. Since her husband was the deity himself, an immortal being who could never die, society regarded the Devdasi as Nitya Sumangali or Akhand Subhagyavati. She was a woman who could never become a widow. In an era when ordinary women were subjected to having their hair shorn and being confined to a room upon widowhood, every step taken by a Devdasi was considered auspicious. However, the role of Devdasi was not merely a matter of religious ritual. They were among the greatest artists of their time. Inscriptions from the 11th century at the Brihadiswara temple in Tanjore clearly state that King Raja Raj Chola had settled 400 Devdasis at the temple. They were far more than mere servants. They were granted Devadai, land dedicated to their service from the royal treasury and provided with spacious residences. At a time when women in general society were denied the right to education, Devdasis were scholars proficient in Sanskrit, Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada. They possessed complete knowledge of the Vedas, Purans, and literature. Dance and music were the very essence of their being. The Bharatnatyam and Odissi dance forms that we proudly showcase to the world today owe their birth and centuries of survival sustained by the blood and sweat of these women to the Devdasis. They held such a high status in society that whenever they walked through a temple or a royal court, even mighty kings and generals would bow their heads in reverence. They possessed legal rights to property, could bequeath land to their daughters, and lived their lives without needing permission from any man. In her renowned book, Nitya Sumangali Towards the Semiotics of the Devdasi Tradition, Dr. Saskia C. Kersenboom illustrates that a Devdasi was not merely a woman, she was the embodiment of spirituality, power, and art, a figure whose very sight was considered a blessing. How then did this magnificent legacy descend into a Sodom quagmire? As the British began to colonize India during 18th and 19th centuries, they dismantled the Indian princely states and zamindar system. They imposed heavy taxes on temple lands, consequently the temples ran out of funds. Deprived of resources, the temples stopped providing the Devdasis with their monthly stipends and land allocations. Suddenly, women who had enjoyed a life of opulence for centuries found themselves unable to afford even 2 square meals a day. It was during this period that the British Victorian mindset took hold. For British Christian missionaries, the very concept of a woman who was not under the control of a single husband, one who moved about freely and danced in temples, was sinful. Failing to understand this aspect of our culture, they branded all forms of our temple dance as nautch and equated them with prostitution. In 1892, the British, joined by certain educated Indian reformers, launched the anti Nach movement, urging people to boycott the dances of the Devdasis and refuse to watch them perform. The consequence was the complete erasure of the Devdasis' self respect and their art form. The upper caste elite appropriated their dance form, Sadir Atam. They stripped away its erotic elements and gave it a respectable new name, Bharatnatyam. Figures like Rukmani Devi, Arundale brought this dance to the stage when it garnered acclaim. Yet the very Devdasis who had preserved this dance for 1,000 years were socially ostracized. Meanwhile, driven by poverty, Devdasis were forced to submit to the sexual demands of local landlords and wealthy patrons to survive. Their art perished and their physical exploitation began. Yet, even amidst this darkness, a battle was fought that history can never forget. Author V. Sri Ram recounts a remarkable story in his book, The Devdasi and the Saint, The Life and Times of Bangalore Nagaranthanam. Born in 1878, Bangalore Nagaranthanam was a renowned Devdasi and a Carnatic singer. A music festival known as Tyagraj Aradhana used to be held annually in Thiruvayyuru to honor Tyagraj, the greatest saint of Carnatic music. However, Orthodox men established a rule prohibiting women or Devdasis from singing on the stage there. Nagaranthanam did not accept this silently. She sold her life's earning, jewelry, and property. She purchased a plot of land directly opposite Saint Tyagraj's Samadhi and had a temple built there. She launched a parallel music festival for women, which eventually became even more popular than the men's festival. Ultimately, the men had to yield, and the two festivals merged in the 1940s. After independence, the government of India enacted laws to curb this exploitation. The Bombay Devdasi Protection Act was introduced in 1934, the Madras Devdasi Act was enacted in 1947, and subsequently the Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka Devdasi Prohibition Act were passed in 1988. These laws clearly declared that dedicating any girl to a deity was illegal. But did the enactment of these laws put an end to the practice? Certainly not. Instead of disappearing, the practice became even more sordid and went underground. Nowadays, no wealthy or educated girl becomes a Devdasi. Today, this practice has morphed entirely into a form of caste based poverty and human trafficking because the families are destitute. If a daughter is born into a Dalit or marginalized family, or if illness strikes, the household parents, driven by superstition and poverty, marry their 8 to 10-year-old daughter to the goddess Yelema. Once the Potukattu ritual is performed, the girl can no longer marry an ordinary man. This marks the beginning of the true exploitation. When the girl reaches puberty, wealthy villagers or pimps purchase her. Her first transaction is orchestrated under the guise of religious sanctions. Once a patron grows bored with her, she is sold into prostitution in the red light districts of cities like Mumbai, Pune, or Bangalore. She, who was once the goddess of the temple, has today been forced to sit in a brothel. You might be wondering why they cannot earn a living from their traditional arts, dance, and music. This is where the most significant shift of modern times comes into play. In the past, people would visit temple or devdasis to learn classical dance and music. However, we live in the digital age now. People learn dance and music through YouTube, Instagram Reels, and high-end private academies. The traditional Gurukul system has vanished. What is the extent of their existence today? The figures will leave you stunned. Despite legal prohibitions, the 2013 report by the National Human Rights Commission revealed that approximately 450,000 Devdasis or women associated with the practice still exist in India. The plight of these women today is dire. Their children are often denied school admission simply because the father's name is missing from their records. They do not receive adequate pensions or rehabilitation. This is the complete story of Devdasi tradition, a practice that began at the pinnacle of India's artistic and spiritual achievements, where women were revered as the embodiment of music and wisdom, yet has today degenerated into a wretched manifestation of social degradation, poverty, and exploitation. Those who once sang before the deity within the sanctum sanctorum of the temple are now forced to eke out a stifling existence in the darkest corners of society. That's it for today. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe our channel. We'll see you in the next video.